And now we meet the man behind the success of the Nigerian Film Festival in Paris, Serge Noukoué. He is the co-founder and executive director of the NollywoodWeek festival. He is striving to change the image of African cinema, mainly to give the prolific Nigerian sector its letters of nobility. He spoke to our journalist Lionel Koshwa about his career as well as his analysis when it comes to the vitality of Nigerian cinema. Let's listen to him. Hello, Serge Noukoué. Thank you for joining us on Initiative Africa. You're Franco-Beninois director and creator of the NollywoodWeek festival in Paris, which has become the benchmark for Nigerian cinema in France and Europe. Can you start by telling us a little bit about yourself?
In terms of my education, for my master's degree, I focused on culture, particularly in the management of cultural projects. In fact, from the very start, I realized the importance of the relationship between culture and development, and so I decided to actively get involved. It was a way I could contribute to developing creative industries on the African continent. As a result, my professional path led me to Nollywood and Nigeria, with the idea of promoting the industry and to make it possible for the public to learn about Nollywood.
You are the Cinema and Media Cultural Attaché at the French Embassy in Kenya. What is your role exactly?
As the attaché in charge of culture, audiovisual and cinema, my role consists of creating partnerships in allowing synergies to take place between the cinema industry. Here in France, with what is broadly happening in East Africa, I help train audio-visual industry professionals in these countries and create partnerships that can lead to co-productions or even set up the sort of collaborations for the development of the creative industries and particularly of the audiovisual industries between West Africa and France.
Where does this passion for African cinema come from?
My passion for African cinema is based on what the cinema shows us. We are in the world of images, in the world of communication, and all that is intensified by the social networks. Above all, though, we understand the importance of images. So if you talk of the image, it's not just about cinema, but the cinema remains perhaps the most powerful tool when it comes to the image. And I've always been fascinated by what Africans say about themselves and the stories told by Africans rather than those we're used to seeing through the traditional media. And so for me, Nollywood was the perfect example of the fact these are people who finance their own films without necessarily having a lot of resources. But in fact, Nollywood has allowed all its creators to tell their stories to the world.
How did this festival come about, and what was your motivation?
The festival was born out of a common passion between me and the others who were in at the start of the venture, in particular the co-founder of the festival, Nadura Shakur. And the idea was really to change the image, to change the narrative, as they say, around African cinema and Nigerian cinema. A cinema which for a long time was seen as amateur, not really professional. The idea was to show that there was more to Nigerian cinema, and that, in short, that was the origin of the NollywoodWeek.
Nigerian cinema, commonly known as Nollywood, has become the world's second largest producer of movies. Where does all this energy come from?
Such energy can be explained first by demographic factors, since Nigeria is the most populous country in Africa, which is a very important and essential factor in the development of the industry. Then, from a chronological point of view, the cinema industry developed in the early 90s, when there was the democratization of digital tools, cameras, and so on, that suddenly became available to everyone in terms of costs. You know, before that, the films the public could watch were essentially from elsewhere, from India, China, America. Suddenly, however, there was the possibility for the Nigerian public of seeing themselves on the screen, of being able to identify with the images, and it really was a turning point. People quickly understood the appetite for Nigerians to be able to identify with local stories with local heroes, local stories and hopes.
Et du coup, Nollywood, en fait, ça va au-delà même du Nigeria, c'est vraiment l'idée de...
And so you have Nollywood. In fact, it goes even beyond Nigeria. It's really the idea of allowing to show this perspective throughout the world. It is this African reality which was so often restricted and so often marginalized and so often absent from our screens. And there's the dynamism of the Nigerians themselves, who overall are a very enterprising people. This entrepreneurial side was accentuated in a certain way by the emerging Nigerian audiovisual industry. And now, today, we have reached the staggering number of more than 1,000 films produced a year. A result of demographics, certainly, but also linked to history and to a very strong cultural base. Because there are several traditions that predate cinema that existed in the theatre. Yoruba theatre, for example, and which were able to make the switch to the audio-visual universe and today to Nollywood.
Et qui ont pu en fait basculer dans l'univers.
The success of Nollywood is really the result of several factors and elements that enable this industry to develop as it has today.
The Nollywood film was often criticized for a lack of quality, particularly in terms of the script. In recent years, this seems to have changed with the arrival, for example, of stories highlighting the LGBT community. What's your take on that?
C'est vrai que pendant de nombreuses années, effectivement...
It's true that for many years Nigerian cinema was not known for its great screenwriting. I believe over the years we have, in fact, seen a change. We have seen an evolution in scripting.
Une évolution dans ce domaine-là, liée au fait que quand même
Let's remember that when this industry started to take off, it was with many people who hadn't the experience or the training, a sort of System D, learning on the job. But today the industry brings together people from all walks of life, including people who have been trained in the West, and who then return to Nigeria to contribute, step by step, to this wonderful industry, which is in the process of developing. And so, what we also see is a diversity of stories that did not necessarily exist before. To start with, there were no storylines about day-to-day life, of life in the neighborhoods, that sort of thing. But today every topic seems to be covered. There's comedy, drama, also the thriller. There really are more types of stories and a diversification of genre that now are even more interesting and which resonate abroad too. Precisely because there's this spectrum which has widened, and in terms of themes, every theme today is tackled, allowing our movie business to develop further and to be more demanding in terms of quality.
With the arrival of Iroko TV, Nigerian Netflix and Amazon on the African market, Nigerian cinema is being exported to Africa and beyond, targeting the diaspora. Do you think it can seduce the European and American market?
Does Nollywood appeal to the European and American market? It's what the festival is banking on. It says, we're here to show that it is possible. Today it's clear there is an audience outside of Africa, outside of Nigeria. There is an audience in Europe, America. Now, are films that are not shown at festivals or outside the various streaming platforms released in theaters on a regular basis? No. Despite the popularity of the movies. There is still a way to go, and this, I believe, consists of ensuring that Nigerian films can be released in theaters on a regular, weekly or monthly basis. We are more advanced today than we were in 2013 when we organized the first festival.
On est quand même aujourd'hui plus avancé qu'on ne l'était en 2013 quand on a lancé le festival. Donc je reste optimiste.
I remain optimistic about the future of our films in France, in Europe and across the world. It's thanks to the streaming services and also to a public we could say is eager to discover more.
Comment dire, à une certaine curiosité aussi du public.
Things are advancing in French-speaking Africa. Take the recent opening of new film schools in Dakar, in which Netflix has also shown interest. I'm thinking of Koutrajmi in particular. How do you see the future of African cinema?
Moi, je pense que l'avenir du cinéma africain, il est radieux.
I think the future of African cinema is bright. We're at the dawn of something here. We've mentioned the schools that are being created in Dakar, and that, I think, is the lifeblood of the industry. Because training screenwriters, training technicians, training directors, and training producers is essential and will enable this industry to develop and reach its potential. Today we are at the beginning of what could really be a great future for African cinema.
What is missing in Nigerian cinema to make it a success in the European and American markets?
Alors, qu'est-ce qui manque au cinéma nigérian pour qu'il puisse s'exporter davantage?
What is missing in Nigerian cinema to make it more attractive to these markets? Yeah, it's a good question. I think that in general, a lot of progress has been made. There has been an important evolution over the last 10 years, which is not negligible. Now, the public is also used to certain things, and the public is used to Hollywood and used to Indian films, which have now been established for many years.
Donc le cinéma nigérien reste un peu plus jeune. Et donc, peut-être que ce qui manque, c'est tout simplement du temps.
Nigerian cinema is still relatively young, so what it needs maybe is simply more time. Because habits, as we well know, are tough to break. That's the reality of the situation. Nevertheless, I think Nigerian cinema can take hold and become a major power and a major exporter in the years ahead. But it's something that doesn't happen overnight. So even if it's a film industry that has existed for only a few years now and has been knocking on the doors of European and American audiences, it does take time. And I think that soon its films will be selected in major festivals, such as the Cannes Film Festival or the Venice Film Festival, which will also allow us to cement the reputation of the cinema, which it's in the process of achieving.
Qui vont permettre aussi de légitimer encore plus un certain statut que ce cinéma est en train d'atteindre.
I believe that it's a matter of time, a few years, and we will see a situation where this festival and this cinema will be increasingly recognized, acclaimed and appreciated, and will finally achieve the notoriety it deserves. But these things take time. Rome wasn't built in a day, as they say, and I think it's the same for Nollywood.
C'est la même chose pour Nollywood, mais
but when we look at the evolution of Nigerian music with Afrobeat, which today is on all the airwaves, I think it gives us hope and a lot of optimism for Nigerian cinema. The elements are now all in place, as are the fundamentals, for this industry to develop and become a major player to be reckoned with in the future.